Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat. A little different than a webinar. Um, we are thrilled to have Eric Maddox with us, and he's going to be carrying on a lively conversation with our Society President, Chris May, in just a couple of minutes. I'm Mark Salter. I'm the Executive Director for CFA Society Minnesota. I need to take a few seconds to do two quick thank yous. Number one, to thank all of our annual sponsors, the firms you see on the screen in front of you. Without their generous support of financial resources and thought leadership resources, we couldn't do things like this every year. So we really appreciate all of the support they give us throughout the year. We also wanted to take a moment and thank very quickly the folks at MFS Investment Management for generously sponsoring today's Fireside Chat. They're the folks who are making it possible for Eric and Chris to have this conversation. To introduce all of that, I'm going to turn it over briefly to Katherine Muddari, who is Director of Relationship Management at MFS. Katherine, take it away, please.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the kind words. I just want to say hello to everybody here. As Mark mentioned, my name is Katherine Muddari, and I'm with MFS Investment Management. We are excited to sponsor today's Fireside Chat with Staff Sergeant and Interrogator Eric Maddox. In 2003, Eric collected the intelligence that directly led to the capture of Saddam Hussein, the ace of spades in the infamous deck of cards. His technique helped shape future intelligence collection for the military. For his efforts, Eric was awarded the National Intelligence Medal of Achievement, the Defense Intelligence Agency's Director's Award, the Legion of Merit, and the Bronze Star. Today, Eric will be talking about his experiences in Iraq as an interrogator, but more importantly, he's going to be sharing the technique that he developed that led to his success. It's called empathy-based listening. Empathy-based listening teaches that trust is the most important element in all relationships. It is truly one of the most powerful tools you will discover for communication, both personal and professional. When developed, it leads to deeper transparency, understanding, and connections in all of your conversations. You will gain and maximize influence. As we continue to operate in this virtual environment and a more complex and tumultuous environment, I really believe that the ability to establish trust and break down biases is more important than ever. So thank you again so much for your time. I know you're going to learn something new from today's session. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to your moderator, Chris May.
Thanks, Katherine. I appreciate it. Eric, let's get started. You have a fascinating story to tell. I've heard it a couple times. It's kept me on the edge of my seat every time. But can we start out and just level set? You were a Chinese Mandarin linguist. You were never supposed to be in Iraq. How did you even get there?
That's a great question, Chris, and a great place to start. So in 2003, when the United States went to war in Iraq and the takedown Saddam Hussein, I was a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I was a trained interrogator, but for every interrogator that the Army trained, they required that they learn a foreign language. And the United States Army had me learn Chinese Mandarin. And when you learn Chinese Mandarin, the Army's so excited, they take you away from any interrogations. They say, you're never going to do an interrogation. We're going to use you as an intelligence collection officer against the Chinese. So in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, I was working as an intelligence collection officer against the Chinese in Los Angeles, California. I was responsible for conducting interviews of Chinese researchers and scientists along the West Coast. And I was told, you will never, ever go to the Middle East. Well, 3 months into the war in Iraq, I'm in Los Angeles. I receive highly unexpected orders for Baghdad. They immediately fly me to the Baghdad International Airport. I'm picked up by these soldiers who are not wearing uniforms. They're full beards, civilian clothes. They kind of take me away from anybody else on the aircraft in this room, and they tell me, you're now with the Joint Special Operations Command. That's the United States military task force responsible for tracking down the most wanted people in the world. At the time, Saddam Hussein was the most wanted man in the world. He was the ace of spades. So if you all remember, in 2003, the Department of Defense, they created that deck of playing cards, and it was Saddam and all of his senior regime members. And these bearded soldiers said, our exclusive mission is to track down and kill or capture every single person on the deck of cards, mainly Saddam. And Chris, I'm in shock. And I just said, that's awesome. I didn't even know if you guys actually existed. And now I know you do. What on earth am I doing here? I'm a Chinese Mandarin linguist. And they said, you're a trained interrogator. I said, you all know I've never done an interrogation before in my entire life. I've never been to war before. What am I doing here? And one of the bearded soldiers said, Eric, you're former infantry. You're a graduate of Ranger School. And Chris, they were right. When I first enlisted in the Army back in 1994, I enlisted as an infantry grunt. I spent 3 years as a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. And while I was there, I went and I graduated the Army's Ranger School. Years later, they teach me Chinese Mandarin and train me as an interrogator. And one of the bearded soldiers said, Eric, Joint Special Operations Command, we have Delta Force teams all through Baghdad looking for Saddam. But we also have a Delta Force team up in his hometown of Tikrit, Iraq. And that Delta Force team keeps calling us, we interrogators, and they want us to go out there with them on their raids and their missions. And he said, Eric, we're interrogators. We're not infantry. So we called the Army and we said, give us a list of every single Army interrogator who's former infantry and a graduate of Ranger School. They said, Eric, you were the only name on the list. They said, welcome to Baghdad. So Chris, that is how I began my very first ever wartime deployment.
Welcome to Baghdad. What an introduction. So in some ways, you had the exact right skill set for what they were looking for. But in other ways, you were not the guy that should have been the one to find Saddam. So how does this happen? Like, where do you go next from here?
Great question. They immediately sent me up to that Delta Force team in Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. And it's Tikrit, Iraq. It's 20,000 people in his hometown. It's right in the middle of the Sunni Triangle. The Delta Force commander told me, he said, yes, Eric, you are going out with us on these raids. But the United States Army also has a prison here in this town of Tikrit. It's got hundreds of detainees. And the commander said, Eric, these prisoners are not talking. The commander said, we've never fought a war like this before. There's no uniform. There's no battlefield. There's no smoking gun. There is no chain of command. He said, Eric, we want you to go on these raids, but you're also going to live here with us. And you've got to help us get these prisoners to cooperate. So Chris, the very first night with this team, we're going on raids. I mean, leaving the wire, going on raids to people's houses. And we get there, I interrogate the people there all night long. But the next day they sent me to this detention facility. I get a couple of prisoners. I bring them back to this cool little Delta Force house on one of Saddam's former palace complexes. It's where the U.S. military was in his hometown of Tikrit. And the Delta Force commander in their house, he gave me this room to do all my interrogations. And he gave me a linguist and I began the interrogations. And Chris, I had never done interrogations, but I had been trained. I'd received the best interrogation training in the world. And I will tell you, the Army interrogation techniques, they do not teach or condone torture, but the techniques are very zero-sum game. Everything we were taught was that with conviction and authority, you've got to make this prisoner think you know everything about him. And eventually they'll go, uncle. And when I started to talk to this first prisoner, I realized this is not going to work. I'm not gaining cooperation from this prisoner. He's shutting down on me. And after a couple hours, I got the other prisoner and I talked to him in the same thing. And I realized there is no trust. There is no way these techniques will work because these aren't soldiers in a war zone. And I told myself, I don't know how I'm going to get these prisoners to trust me, but I've got to figure out who they are. What does it mean to be Iraqi, Sunni, and Shia and living under the wrath of Saddam Hussein? So the next day I brought in a prisoner. And Chris, I told myself, just talk to him. Just see how long you can keep him talking. And Chris, I did exactly what you would think you would see. on a movie. I was good cop, building rapport, trying to be friendly, asking about his family, and the prisoner would answer my questions. But there was still no trust. And I was talking to this prisoner for hours and hours, and I started to realize there are times when this man does want to open up. There are times when he is being more transparent, and I could not figure out what it was. And that first week, as I'm spending dozens of hours with these prisoners, I started to realize these men want to be transparent. They want to be open up when I can remove my ego. And what I mean is when I talk to this person and forget about looking at them as the enemy, and I forget about trying to gain cooperation and get a confessionable and actionable intelligence and just actually listen to them, that's when they're being more open up with me. And as the weeks went on and I was talking to dozens of prisoners, I was able to put myself so completely in their shoes that they started to reveal what they knew about the insurgency in the Sunni Triangle. My Delta Force commander, he thought it was awesome. He said, "This is perfect. You're building a picture of the enemy for us." And as the weeks and months went on, I was able to gain the trust of these prisoners so deeply they started to give targets. They started to tell me, "Eric, I can take you to other fighters." And I went to my Delta Force commander. His name was Bam Bam. And I went to Bam Bam and I said, "I can get you targets. They actually want to help us take you to targets." And Bam Bam said, "Eric, it's not the way we do it." He said, "This is Delta Force. This is the most elite, highly trained soldiers in the world. We cannot put them out on the battlefield based on the enemy's information." And I said, "Bam Bam, I've built a level of trust with these prisoners I did not know could exist. They are telling me the truth." He said, "Give me 2 locations. Give me 2 spots where you believe they're telling the truth." And I gave him 2 targets. And that night, Bam Bam and the Delta Force team raided those 2 spots. And the individuals, the enemy fighters we were looking for were actually there. For the first time since I'd been with this team, we actually captured somebody we were looking for. And I brought him in and I told Bam, I said, "Come watch me do this. Watch me talk to these men." And by the time we captured him, by the time the sun came up the next morning, these 2 fighters had come completely to our side. And they said, "Eric, I'll take you to other people. I will help you." And Bam Bam told me, he said, "Okay, when you do this, we cannot put these prisoners back in the system. They're just going to get shipped away." He goes, "Eric, when you build this level of trust, these prisoners are going to live with us." And we were living like a mini castle in one of Saddam's former complexes. And Bam Bam gave me a room and a bathroom for the prisoners. And as I was able to gain that level of trust, they stayed with us and they became my board of advisors. And each day they would help guide us to the next target and to the next. And over the next 5 months, we captured over 300 insurgency fighters. And we learned from these prisoners that at the very top of this entire insurgency was one man. He was a former inner circle bodyguard of Saddam Hussein. And this one man, his name was Mohammed Ibrahim. He was leading the whole thing. And I was able to learn what it meant to be one of these men. And everything I did was to help their situation, get them released from prisoners, get them forgiven for what they've done in this war. They confirmed this man, this bodyguard, he had to be with Saddam. He had to be at Saddam's location. And as my tour's running out, I'm down to 2 weeks. And I went to Bam Bam and I said, "You know he's here. Saddam Hussein's got to be in Crete." And Bam Bam told me very clearly, he said, "Nobody in the United States government thinks Saddam's in his hometown. Eric, there's 20,000 people here. We dropped 15,000 soldiers here. We've been through every single house." And I said, "Bam Bam, I know they're telling the truth and they know he's here." And Bam Bam said, "You have less than 2 weeks here. They are not going to let you stay. If Saddam's here, we've got to find him in the next 2 weeks." And we laid out a plan on our map. And I said, "If we follow these links to this bodyguard, I think we can get him." And Bam Bam said, "I will hit every target you get." And over the next 7 days, we found Mohammed Ibrahim's nephew, who took us to Mohammed Ibrahim's best friend. And the best friend took us to his business partner. And the business partner took us to his brother. And the bodyguard, the man who I thought could take us to his own brother took us to Muhammad Ibrahim's driver. And when I brought in the driver with 5 days to left to go on my tour, the driver looks at me and he said, Eric, every single night I drop my boss, this bodyguard, Muhammad Ibrahim, at one of these 5 safe houses. He'll be at one of these houses tonight. And I got all 5 of the locations and we knew this was our night. And with 5 nights to go, well, into Crete, Bam Bam and the team, they hit all 5 of those safe houses. But my bodyguard was not at any of them. And Bam Bam brought me back all the prisoners from all 5 safe houses. And Chris, what used to take me hours, I could do it in minutes. I was able to listen to these individuals so closely and build their trust so quickly that they told me, they said, yes, Eric, I was running a safe house. Another prisoner said, Eric, that bodyguard, Muhammad Ibrahim, you scared him off to this town of Samara. And another prisoner said, listen, Eric, in Samara, the bodyguard, Muhammad Ibrahim, his sub-commander's this man. I know where he lives and I will take you. And I went and told Bam Bam. And with 4 days to go on the tour, we went and we raided the sub-commander's house in Samara. But my bodyguard was not there. But the sub-commander's little brother, younger brother, they brought him to me. And in 20 minutes, he breaks and he said, Eric, yes, my brother is Muhammad Ibrahim's sub-commander. He said, Eric, you scared Muhammad Ibrahim off to this town in Samara, but he never came to our house. He rented a house 1 block from where you captured me. He's there right now. And I go and tell Bam Bam, and with 2 days to go on our tour, we raided the house of the bodyguard. But he wasn't there. He wasn't there, but his 20-year-old son was. It was a good hit, and they brought me back the 20-year-old boy of Muhammad Ibrahim, and I interrogated him, and he tells me, he breaks, and he said, Eric, my dad, Muhammad Ibrahim, he was at the house you captured me 2 hours before you came. He left. How would I know where he went now? And I told myself, how would any of my prisoners know where he went now? But I knew, just listen to this boy. He'll give you something. You connect. You stay in his world for him. And Chris, this interrogation of this 20-year-old son of the bodyguard, it went from like, a normal empathy-based interrogation to really just a family counseling session, because Muhammad Ibrahim, the one man who knew where the most modern man in the world is, apparently him and his 20-year-old son's relationship was not going so well. And the 20-year-old son starts crying, and he tells me that his dad doesn't even respect him as a man. And he keeps going on. And he said, I wish my dad and I would do things like we used to do when I was young. I said, well, what'd you guys used to do? He said, we used to go fishing. He says, Eric, he doesn't take me fishing anymore. I said, I really don't want to get in the middle of things. And I certainly don't want to take up for your dad, but he's in the middle of a war right now. We might want to cut him some slack. And the 20-year-old boy said, no, Eric, they still go fishing. They just don't take me. I said, where do they go fishing? And he said, along the Tigris River. I said, where? He goes, Eric, they just built this fish pond along the Tigris River. They fish next to the pond. And Chris, when the boy told me they just built the fish pond, I remembered one of the early interrogations we did when I got to this team in Tikrit. We captured Saddam Hussein's cook. He was a chef, right? He's wide open. He didn't care. Chef said, Eric, I've been Saddam Hussein's cook for 8 straight years. I've cooked every single meal for the president. And it's not that hard of a job because he just really likes this fish dish. It's called mazgoof. The recipe mazgoof, he says, I make the best mazgoof in the world. I'm Saddam Hussein's cook. And when the boy told me they built a fish pond during the middle of a war, why are you going to build a fish pond? Unless you need to stock that pond for your brutal dictator boss, because you cannot go to the market and get fish because the United States has occupied your country. And I went and told Bam Bam. He said, your flight is leaving tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning. And our last raid, we're going to raid a fish pond. And that night, Bam Bam and the team, they went and raided that fish pond. And they built this little bitty shack, and they went inside. They captured 2 men. And 20 minutes later, Bam Bam calls back, and he said, Eric, it's nothing. It's just 2 fishermen. He said, get all these prisoners that were living with us. He goes, you guys are all going to Baghdad, Eric. Your tour's up. And Bam Bam brought me the 2 fishermen, and I loaded up this helicopter, and he looks at me and he said, you don't quit. He goes, get me one more target. It'll be a few days before they send you out of the country. And I went to Baghdad, and they told me my flight's leaving the country in 3 days. And that first night I brought in those 2 fishermen, and it took me 11 hours, Chris. But after 11 hours, one of the fishermen breaks, and he said, I work for Muhammad Ibrahim. He said, Eric, I catch fish out of the river and I put it in the pond every few days. They come and grab fish out of the pond and they leave. And I said, where did he go? Where did the bodyguard go? And the fisherman said, Eric, Muhammad Ibrahim, he's my distant cousin. He said a couple of days ago, he came and he got the address of our mutual aunt and uncle in Baghdad. He said, I think they've gone to Baghdad to hide from you at our aunt and uncle's house. And I'm thinking to myself, that's awesome. We're in Baghdad. And I got the sketch and the map and I called the Bam Bam of Baghdad, the Delta commander in Baghdad. And I said, I need you to do this raid. He said, I'll put it on the list. I said, what does that mean? He said, Eric, we're really busy around here. Nobody thinks Saddam's in Tikrit, and if Saddam's not Tikrit, it doesn't matter where his bodyguard went. I'll put it on the list. And my days came and went, and I'm leaving the country at 8 o'clock in the morning on December 13th, 2003. And at 2 o'clock in the morning on my last day, the Bam Bam of Baghdad calls into the prison. He said, Eric, we had a slow night. We did your raid. He said, Muhammad Ibrahim, the bodyguard, wasn't there. We can bring you the prisoners from the house if you want. I said, bring them in. And they brought them in at 4 in the morning. My flight's leaving in 4 hours. And I brought them in. They said, own the house. And I sat him down and I talked to him. And I just listened to him. And it took me an hour, Chris. And after an hour, I realized this man's not from Baghdad. This man is from Tikrit. And it took me another hour, 6 in the morning. And I finally realized, like, oh my goodness, this is the deputy of my bodyguard. This man's way up on my link diagram. And at 6:15, this man breaks and he said, I'm the deputy of Muhammad Ibrahim. And I said, I need you to take me to him. And inside my head, I'm thinking, if you can do it in the next 15 minutes, that will be great. And he looks at me and he said, Eric, last night, when your soldiers came and captured me at that house, in that bed, he said, Muhammad Ibrahim, the bodyguard, was sleeping in the bed next to me. I thought, oh my goodness, this is Delta Force. They don't miss anybody. I said, did they get my bodyguard last night? And they don't even know it. And I went to the guard. I said, bring me any prisoners from any raids last night. And they brought in 3 prisoners sitting on the ground, handcuffs behind their back and hoods over their head. And I start lifting up hoods. We did not have a picture of Muhammad Ibrahim, but I knew what my bodyguard was supposed to look like. My bodyguard was supposed to have a chin. I would say like the actor John Travolta, but he's got that Tom Brady chin, right? And on the last hood, before I even got it off, I saw that chin. I looked at it and I said, you're Muhammad Ibrahim. Man, I have been waiting to meet you. And he looks at me and in perfect English, he said, you're that interrogator from Tikrit. He said, I've been waiting to meet you too. It's almost 6:30. My flight is leaving at 8, and under no circumstances are they going to let me stay because nobody thinks Saddam's in Tikrit. I brought this man to the interrogation room. I sat him down, and I listened to him at a higher level than he had ever been listened to in his entire life. I told myself, you do not rush it. You solve for this man. You win his trust. And as my time's coming up, it's 7:45, and my bodyguard, tears are running down his face. And he finally looks at me and he said, Eric, I don't know if I should do it. Because he didn't say he couldn't do it. He said, I don't know if I should do it. And I'm thinking, oh, I think you should. I really, really do. And he said, I can't. And I said, I need it now. I said, this isn't a joke. I'm leaving. You will never see me again. There's only 2 people who really knows he's up there, you and me. I need it now. And then like clockwork, they came in. They're like, what are you doing here? You've got to go catch your flight. And I said, this isn't a joke. This isn't a game. I'm leaving. I need him. He said, I got to think. And I'm walking him to his cell. And I said, I don't have time to think. I need it now. And I put him in his cell and he said, I can't. And I looked at it and I said, you're going to change your mind. I will be gone. You will never see me again. When you change your mind, I said, go crazy. Do something. Make the guards come talk to you. No one's going to talk to you because they don't know what you have. Go crazy. And I put him in his cell and I left. And Chris, I went and packed my bags. And a few minutes later, they picked me up and I'm driving across. They're driving me across the tarmac. I'm going to my flight. And the senior interrogator looks at me and he said, what'd you do to that prisoner? I said, I didn't do anything to him. Why? He said, the guards are worried. They think he's trying to kill himself. He will not stop yelling and screaming and banging his head against the wall. and I knew he broke. And I jumped out of the truck. I said, hold the flight. And I ran to the prison, grabbed Muhammad Ibrahim out, brought him to the interrogation room, took off his hood. And I said, where is he? And he looks at me and he said, Eric, we got to go. We got to go right now. I said, where are we going? He said, we're going back to Tikrit. He said, he's in this little village of Adwar at the farmhouse of a man named Kais, name it Jassim. He said, we got to go. And we drew the sketch and the map. And I went outside and I told him, I said, my man just broke. He's going to take us to Saddam in Tikrit. And the senior interrogator said, Saddam Hussein's not Tikrit. Go get on the plane. I said, please call Bam Bam and tell him the bodyguard, Muhammad Ibrahim's dying to take him to the Ace of Spades. And I gave him the sketch and the map, and they took me to that flight and I left. And when you're with this task force, you don't just go home. You've got to go to Doha, Qatar, to the task force of the Joint Special Operations Command. You got to give a top secret out briefing just to go back to the United States. The next morning in Doha, I show up for my out briefing and they knock on the door and a senior officer opens up and he sticks his head out and he says, all briefings today have been canceled. Clunk. And the sergeant knocks on the door and he said, Staff Sergeant Maddox can't leave the country till he gives this briefing. And the senior officer pulled me inside and he said, you're Eric Maddox? I said, yes. He said, Eric, briefing's canceled. We got him. We got him last night. Your bodyguard did it. And I said, how'd it go down? He said, when you left, we called Bam Bam. And Bam Bam and the entire team got on a helicopter, flew to Baghdad, picked up Muhammad Ibrahim, went back to our house, planned and executed the raid of the farmhouse of Kais, name it, Jassim. And they could not find Saddam. Chris, they looked for an hour, and after an hour, Bam Bam goes to the truck, pulls the bodyguard out, takes off his hood and says, where is he? And Muhammad Ibrahim, he won't say a word. He just looks at Bam Bam and he asks to hold his hand. And he grabs him by the hand. He doesn't say anything. And he walks the team around to the back side of the house, still insane, turns to the team and stares at him and starts kicking at the sand with his feet. And he starts digging up the sand and they realize he just dug up the top of a rope. And they moved him aside and they dug, and this rope was connected to a lid, and they cleared it off, and then their weapons drawn, and they looked to the bodyguard and he's looking at him going, and they lifted up the lid and there he was, Saddam Hussein. He was pinpointed by the one man he trusted to never, ever give up his location. And that man broke in less than 90 minutes because he was listened to at a higher level than he'd ever been listened to in his entire life. And Chris, that's how the United States tracked down the Ace of Spades.
Man, like I said, I've heard the story several times. I'm still on the edge of my seat as you're telling it again. You talked about so many things in there: trust, empathy, listening. I mean, you're an interrogator. You learned a way to do it, and you said, "No, this isn't working for me." What did you do? What was different?
I was fighting a different battle than the soldiers who created the techniques had fought before. During normal wars, soldiers come off the battlefield and they're in a uniform. And there's not this plausible deniability if you get a soldier off the battlefield in World War II of whether or not they are the enemy. But in our war, this insurgent war, the enemy, they had jobs during the day. They lived at houses with every other neighbor, and at night they were fighting us. So when we went to their house, there were no smoking guns. There were no chain of command. There were no uniforms. There was plausible deniability. Plausible deniability gave every one of these prisoners hope. When you're captured on the battlefield in a uniform, there's no hope that you're talking your way out. But this hope, I told myself, why am I trying to kill hope? Hope's the most powerful emotion that any of us can have. And I said, how do I solve with that hope? And I thought, wait a second. They have hope to get released. They're civilians. They get released. They're not going to go join the army, back to their army. How do I clear their path so they can go back to life? Because what I learned, and what we should always remember, people are just people. There's no Luke Skywalker and there's no Darth Vader. We all have our faults, but at the end of the day, most people, they want to be able to provide and protect for their family. And I said, okay, how do I get them out of here? Well, first of all, I've got to get them to not be an enemy of the United States. Well, the only way I could do that is have them take us to so many bad guys that Bam Bam or other commanders go, wow, that's now our friend. And then I've got to take out their chain of command. I've got to get their boss arrested, right? So that way they don't leave and be forced back in the insurgency. But most importantly is this: when you truly listen and find the deeper needs of an individual, the deepest need of most of these prisoners is they needed to be released and there not be ramifications against them. And in order to do that, I had to protect their identity. And every second I spent with these prisoners was to say, when you give up information, how do I hide it? How do I keep your giving up this information away from anyone so that it never comes back on you? And when you dive into someone else's world, the key was not that I had these elaborate plans. The key that I was willing to listen to them minus my objectives, my goals, to put myself completely in their shoes to where they said, this guy is doing it for me. And I tell people that's the key to good interrogations, is you must identify the needs of your prisoners and they'll take care of all your needs, which is exactly the way we should look at our clients, we should look at our partners, and how we should look at our subordinates. And that was the biggest difference, Chris.
So that sounds awesome. How, like, break it down for me. Like, how do I do that? How do we do that? How do we make that happen? Like, what are the steps? How does it work?
Okay, so great question. I had to figure that out. And it was great. When you capture Saddam, you never know where your life's headed. I will tell you, if you ever do capture the most wanted man in the world, you'd better get your arms wrapped around the fact that your professional career has probably peaked at that moment. As long as we start there, then we have to look and say, where do we go next? I didn't know. With the capture of Saddam, they sent me back to Washington, D.C. They sent me straight to the Pentagon, to the office of the Secretary of Defense. At the time, it was Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. Secretary Rumsfeld loved the way this went down. And he says, I love the way these interrogations go. He said, I want my own team of interrogators. Staff Sergeant Maddox will be my first one. I'm thinking, what does that mean? By the time I got back to Los Angeles to my office, Secretary Rumsfeld had received the funding for his own team of 30 civilian interrogators. He basically said, I don't want to borrow Staff Sergeant Chinese Mandarin linguists from Los Angeles. I want my own team. Maddox will be my first one. I received the offer to become the first civilian interrogator on this 30-person team that would fall under the Defense Intelligence Agency. Chris, to this day, I have no idea if I had a choice whether or not I took that job, but I took it. And they said, teach this, teach how this works. So when you say, Eric, how do we lay it down? At first, I thought, well, this is very simple. Let me explain to you, and I'm explaining this to interrogators. And they said, all you're doing is being nice to them. I said, no. All I'm doing is listening to them. And they said, Eric, we hear everything you hear. So I struggled to get that buy-in. But my next assignment, Chris, is they sent me back to the battlefield, back out with the Joint Special Operations Command. And this time I had 6 of these civilian interrogators. And I said, I need to see how you all do interrogations. When I watched them, I realized, oh my goodness, they're doing interrogations the old way, the way that everyone was trained. I said, no, watch this. And as I demonstrated it, they said, yeah, we do that. And I said, no, you don't. And I interrogated their prisoners who they weren't breaking and they broke. And I said, we're doing them side by side. And as I did side by side conversations, that's when I realized, Chris, they are hearing a completely different conversation than I am. And we said, okay, why is that occurring? And over the next 6 months, doing hundreds of interrogations, we realized we have a listening problem. And it works like this. I'm going to give you some statistics. On average, people only listen to 25% of what they hear. And I know you've heard crazy statistics like that. Why is that? Why is it 25%? That is so low. And it comes down to the way our brains work. We can hear 5 times faster than the average person can talk. What does that mean? It means Hearing someone only takes up 20% capacity in our brain. That's fantastic because we had this 80% capacity, right? No, because we also discovered something else. When it comes to listening, the brain cannot multitask. So we can't take this 20% of what we're hearing, digest it in one compartment, and then use this 80% capacity. But we are naturally selfish and self-centered. So it feels as though when we're listening to someone that they're talking really, really slow, and we get bored out of our minds. And what do we do with that boredom? Anything else we want, because we are so selfish and self-centered, and we fill up that capacity with things that are priority to us, thinking, we can compartmentalize them. And now that we realized we couldn't, we said, wait a second, we've got to figure out what these distractions are. So we started to list all the mental distractions that come into our mind. Well, come to find out there are thousands, but they do break down into 6 categories. And we created the 6 categories of listening distractions, categories 1 through 6. So to learn the process, we first have to cover, what are these 6 categories? Where do all our distractions fall into place? Category 1 being the least significant, category 6 being the most significant, means it lowers your listening the most. Category 1, immediate non-biased distractions. What does that mean? Non-biased. It doesn't have anything to do with the person that you're trying to listen to, but immediate things in your immediate area. Chris, if right now someone's watching this presentation and behind their computer screen is a TV, if it's on, even if it's on mute, it still lowers their listening. If the temperature of the room is uncomfortable, that's going to lower your listening. If the clothes that you're wearing don't fit so well, all those things can lower our listening. Category 2 distractions, personal, non-biased distraction. What does that mean? Non-biased. It doesn't have anything to do with the person that you're listening to. Personal things going on in our world. If right now you're listening to me and after this presentation, you've got a big client meeting and maybe you are given a presentation, how much are you actually listening to me, or how much you're thinking about that? If you have a child who's struggling in school or a family member who's sick in the hospital, all these things are going to enter your mind, those lower our listening. Category 3, super interesting category, our lack of topic familiarity during a conversation. How many times are we talking to an individual, a CFO, a CEO from an industry that we're just not that familiar with? If they start using terms, acronyms, nomenclatures that we don't know, what do? We hear it, and our mind goes, oh, it must be important. And we will get wrapped around the axle on the unknown single term. It will collapse our listening. Category 4 distractions. Here we go. 4, 5, and 6 categories. These are the big ones. Category 4, listening distraction. Biases towards the individuals that we're listening to. Our preconceived notions about how we deem this individual sees the topic of conversation, or how they even see us. How many times are we talking to an individual and we're like, oh, I know this person takes so long to make a decision. Oh my goodness, this person always likes to be right. And that bias that we have towards them, even if they've earned it, Chris, even if they've earned it, it still filters the words that we hear from them, and it lowers our listening. And then category 5, this is a big one. It applies to you all, especially today. Category 5, listening distraction. Thinking about our goals, our agenda, and our objectives during the conversation. How many times do we get in a conversation, one of our meetings, and we have these goals? I want to figure this out. I need to get to the bottom of this. And that's what you do, right? You're problem solvers. You are there to seek information. The problem is this: when we're talking to someone and they say something that is a lead, that is a point, instead of further discovering, truly getting a perspective of what they mean by a statement, we go immediately to solution, how it fits into our puzzle. It psychologically separates us from the conversation, and it lowers our listening. And then category 6, this is the big one. We all suffer from this. Category 6, listening distraction. Thinking about what we are going to say next during the conversation. I know you all do it. I continually have to fight myself not to do it. Now imagine we're in a business meeting. We're talking to someone and we have a preconceived notion about how they see this topic of conversation. They say something that piques our interest, that could fulfill one of our agendas, one of our objective points. And now we are creating what we're going to say next to be pithy and smart and wise. I mean, Chris, it's a miracle we even speak at 20. We listen at even 25%. So what we realized, if we can identify our distractions, put them in these categories and minimize them, Chris, we can get our listening from 25 up to 50%. I am not here to try to help you to get your listening to 50%. I want to get your listening deep into the 80s and into the 90s, and there is only one way. I've done 2,700 interrogations. I sit across individuals where there is zero trust. And I'm telling you, my entire purpose when I begin these conversations, I must build trust. And it's my understanding of what trust really means during a conversation. People want to know, sure, are you good at your job? They want to know, are you going to be honest and forthright? Are you going to cheat me? But at our professional level, at your professional level, that can be established by the credibility, our brand, organizations that we're associated with, our resumes, social proof. But every time someone sits down to a conversation, they have the largest, most significant question of trust, and it must be addressed. And the question is this: right now, during a conversation, the person that you're listening to wants to know, are you making this about them, or are you making this about yourself? As we listen at 25%, it's a clear message to them. It's all about you. You're not even listening to them. This is about your goals and your agendas. When we can remove our distractions, then we must put a new priority during conversations. And the priority is this. Yes, we have an agenda, and the agenda is to do this. I must seek to understand and demonstrate that I'm seeking to understand the perspective of the individual speaking with regards to this topic of conversation at this moment in time. What does that mean? It means we are seeking true empathy. When somebody speaks to us, imagine if everything, all that capacity, yes, we hear them at this 20%, but what if we take that 80% and we reflect it, all that mental capacity, and say, what does this mean for them? Where are they coming from? What do they need? As a result of that, it creates us into discovering for them. We are not looking at our goals, our objectives, and most important, we don't go to immediately to solution or contradiction or one-upsmanship or being the funny person. I mean, you can go down any personality. Most of them have characteristics which demonstrate, here's what I do at 25%. I'm going to make this some way about me. But when we discover, we allow them to look and go, wait, are you listening at a higher pace? Because people won't believe it just on an initial one-time response or an initial one-time great question. Because we've all been conditioned to believe that on average, people only listen at 25%. Every time we get into a conversation, people drop breadcrumbs. From the moment they start speaking, they're wondering right now, even if it's your spouse, even if it's your best friend, a partner that you've been with for 20 years, they're trying to figure out your perspective with regards to this topic of conversation at this moment in time. So a level of trust that we've established, they still want to know right now, is this about you or is it about me? And in doing so, every time they speak, they drop breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs are words, phrases, but they're tests that say, are you hearing me? All we have to do when someone speaks is know, what are the breadcrumbs? What do they want me to hear? Identify that and return it with a discovery. I was able to gain the cooperation of 2,700 prisoners. On average, I could gain cooperation in less than 20 minutes. And it's because within the first 3 minutes of speaking, somebody's going to drop at a minimum 5 breadcrumbs. And when you establish a culture, a mindset that all I'm doing is listening for you and I'm discovering for you, people go, you're the person I want to partner with. This is such a lonely place at 25%. Everyone's doing their own thing. Everyone's living their own world. Now that I see this is about you, it doesn't matter. And what's amazing, it doesn't matter if people have the same beliefs, the same ideology, even the same goals. Just the ability to say, I will seek to understand you is the highest level of trust that we can establish in a relationship.
There's so much there. And I'm trying not to get sucked into thinking what I'm going to say next. So it's going to take me a second here. But you're talking about breadcrumbs here at the end. And I'm like really excited to hear more about that. Can you talk specifically about what breadcrumbs look like, both for you and maybe what it looks like for us? Because it would probably be different in sort of a business setting.
So they can look different in a personal setting and a business setting, but for the most part, breadcrumbs are very similar. They can come in different categories and they're easy to learn. So let's look at the big breadcrumbs, right? It's the category I like to call exclamatory statements. So what is a breadcrumb? A breadcrumb says, all right, we're sitting across the table. On average, people listen at 25%. I would love to be open. I would love to be transparent, but I don't like to look stupid and I don't want to be embarrassed. And I don't want to just dump everything. We know people who with low social EQ, they'll come out and they're going to dump everything. They're going to be wide open, even when you're not listening. So, but most of us go, I don't want to expose myself unless you're actually listening. But big breadcrumbs, exclamatory statements. If you're ever talking to someone and they say, here's the deal. Whatever statement comes next is the breadcrumb. It's what they want you to hear. They go, no, wait. Here's something you need to understand. Whatever comes next needs to be the statement that you discover on. Whoa, you're not listening to me. No, I don't think you're listening. I just wish you would listen. I mean, they're telling you what they want, but it's the statement next. And usually what we ended up doing is we contradict it. We disagree with it. We want to debate on why they're wrong and we're right. And actually what we really like to do is just make it about ourselves. But breadcrumbs are much more subtle because that's an exclamatory statement. Most breadcrumbs, they come in subjective adjectives. What do I mean by that? If we're talking to someone and we say, how are you all doing as a firm? How was your 2020? And they say, crazy, absolutely crazy, right? Probably a pretty normal statement. Crazy does not mean the same to you as it does to them, but 95% of the time, we're going to hear that. We're going to go, well, you can say that again. I tell you what, I hope we get through this and who knows it, right? And we take it assuming what they mean. Not only do we not know what they mean, they're dying for us to ask them. All you have to do is go, so crazy, like tell me specifically what was most crazy for you all. That's all they want you to ask. And they're gonna go, well, first quarter was pretty normal. And then things got tricky, with the stimulus and then people working from home. But we're getting through it. Crazy, we're getting through it. These are all subjective. All they want you to do is say, how well are you all getting through it? When you say it was crazy, it was tricky, what do you mean by that? Right? This isn't an interrogation in no way. This is what they want you to ask them. Most of the time, people are going to drop their subjective adjectives just to see where you are. Now, sometimes people are more open about their breadcrumbs. They might ask you a question, right? I'm going to do you a favor. Well, I don't know if it's a favor or not, but as you and I communicate, I will pinpoint when you drop breadcrumbs to me, if that's okay, and then I will demonstrate that. But when somebody asks a question, if it's off where the line should go, like for instance, if you say, Eric, this is very interesting and it makes sense how this works in a combat zone, but how does this apply? For analysts, things are a little bit different, right? Your breadcrumb is, don't tell me again how effective this is. Don't tell me how right you are. Make the comparison from an interrogation setting to an analyst setting. Right. But I should be and say, but specifically, Chris, where would you like to see the correlation? specifically, where are you thinking in your mind of how it applies, right? That's the breadcrumb that we can pick up. And when I ask you that question, you go, wow, this guy's really listening to me. He's making this about me.
That's fantastic. I know we've gone 50 minutes or so, and if I don't pause here and mention this, I'm going to just dominate the Q&A. We've already gotten one question in, but I guess I would like to encourage everyone to please send in questions as you can in the chat. I'll try to tie them into the conversation that Eric and I are having. Katherine, I know you asked up front if there was something you could interject. If you want to do that now, that's awesome. Otherwise, Eric and I will keep going as the questions roll in.
Chris, thank you so much. I guess one of my most pressing questions is, we're operating in this virtual environment. And to me, I've always picked up so many nonverbal cues in my conversations with clients and colleagues. And Eric, do you have any tips there? You know, I feel like we're missing a lot of breadcrumbs by not being able to physically be present.
So I don't know that there could be a better, more pressing question than this. I mean, if we had to say, what's the biggest change we've all gone through in the last 12 months? Virtual communication. So let's not look at it as an easy answer, but this is one I really need you to listen to me. Focus with me on this. I promise this is highly impactful. Relationships rely on trust. Trust comes in different forms. If we're operating at 25%, that means we're not listening very well. But I want you to look at it like this. When people communicate, proximity builds trust. It's familiarity. We get an idea of their body language, the energy in the room, and just being near them does give us a level of connection. So if you imagine if two people are operating on their own stage, and I always say, one thing we should never forget is each and every one of us, we're the lead in our own movie. Now, that can be kind of cool, but think about it. Each single person that's lived on this planet, they're the lead in their own movie. The problem is, if we're all the lead in our own movie, then nobody else is actually in our movie. And so what we tend to do when it comes to relationships, we just sort of scoot our stages close to one another. And that proximity allows us to kind of share the same scenes, use the same backdrop, and even can create similar plots. That's why proximity is so important. Now, with virtual communication, we're saying we remove that, and we got lazy to proximity. Why? Because we only on average listen to 25%. The purpose of normal conversations is one of three reasons. Number one, to transfer information. I say things in an effort to influence thoughts, behavior, action. The other purpose of a conversation is I receive information. I listen in order to help me gather information to make better decisions. And then somewhere in there, we try to do some sort of entertainment. We try to be interesting, we be lively, tell funny stories. So there's three reasons for a conversation. But the intent of verbal communication is supposed to be building trust. Not that you're not going to steal my wallet. Not that you are incapable of doing your job or you're not competent, but it's the trust. The purpose of a conversation has got to be to determine, is this about you or me? When we get lazy to proximity, we just say, I'm just here to transfer information, gather information, make better decisions, give information to influence. Hopefully we have some entertainment. Now that we are working virtually, it is imperative that we have to listen, to seek to understand, and we must demonstrate this. If we do not build trust by demonstrating, I'm not only in my own stage, I can't move my stage next to yours. I'm going to walk off my stage and I'm going to join your movie. If we do not do that, you are going to start seeing a disconnect, a lack of trust, and your relationship, your virtual communication relationships are going to start to separate. Now, look at our clients, look at our prospects, look at our partners, look at the individuals that you interview when you do these very critically important interviews. It's based on a level of trust. Virtual communication is going to take away that crutch of proximity. And it says, if we're going to sit here and virtually just pass information, or gather it for our own decision making, we are going to lose trust. And we lose trust, we start to lose advocates and champions. That is why virtual communication, this is what you've got to learn. The beautiful thing is the world operates at 25%. The first people, the first group, the first company that says, no, our culture is empathy-based listening to build trust. You're going to get out front and you're going to get clean air, because the world does not know how to do this yet. And they're going to figure it out really quickly, or they're going to start losing these relationships. I hope that answers your question, Katherine.
So Eric, all this stuff, I mean, your success is hinged on trust. And what I heard you say is a lot of these folks are breaking in 20 minutes, and trust for me is usually something I think about like over years. You talk about building trust is something that you can start doing early, like in the first couple minutes. And it all seems to come back to this breadcrumbs idea. So I know you talked a little bit about it before, but can you take us another step on breadcrumbs and like maybe a couple more examples? There's a couple more questions coming in. I do want to come back to that, but it just really feels like this is the critical way that you're demonstrating I'm here for you, if I'm hearing you right.
So I have a white paper on breadcrumbs. I'm not saying that answers the question. The critical thing is to realize, so if every statement has a breadcrumb, every statement somebody makes has a breadcrumb. Let's first make sure we're clear. This is where the clarity is going to help. What is a breadcrumb? It's a test that shows the speaker, I am listening for what you want me to listen to. And then it says, not only did I hear what's important to you, but I didn't take your statement of what you want me to listen to and move it towards my agenda, solve it with my solution. But I said, I need to discover more. I want to know more. So now we say, okay, in a statement, what does it look like? And they come in different forms and different fashions, but it's the point that sticks out. It's the contradiction. If somebody says, Eric, you're from Oklahoma, I bet you love the Oklahoma Sooners. I bet you're a big football fan. Gee whiz. Seems like every single person in Oklahoma loves the Oklahoma Sooners and loves football. And if I made the statement of, I do, it's pretty hysterical how blind the people in Oklahoma are that they think we're competitive when, in all actuality, real football only gets played in the SEC, right? I know I'm in Minnesotaville right now, so I know that's, whoa, you can't say that, right? But if I make that statement, my breadcrumb is the contradiction of what you thought was coming out of my mouth. Now, how do we follow up on that? I've basically said what you believe of me to be an Oklahoma Sooner fan, I'm taking to the enemy, right? The SEC, the Southeastern Conference football, right? So the question needs to be, why? What makes you believe that? How did you come to that conclusion? Where is that assessment, right? It's some question on that. Chris, give me a statement. Give me a sentence you hear in business sometimes. I will tell you what the breadcrumb is. And then how do we follow it up? Let's give it a shot. What have you heard recently where I was in a meeting and somebody said this?
I'm thinking the example you said earlier, right? You asked, how was 2020? And the common refrain is, well, the market was crazy or things were nuts or whatever. Like that seems like the common thing that you hear is someone's, what I would call like a throwaway line. But you're saying you're going to take that and say, tell me more. Is that right?
So I would say it's not nuts. It's their way of saying, I know you don't really care, but I'm going to see if you do. Because if you truly care about the question you just asked me, which I don't think you do, that's why I'm going to say, I was crazy. It was nuts. I'm going to give you as much a response as I think you care. And you say, oh, it was crazy. It was nuts. And you go, you're right. What a part of it was craziest for you all? What do you think was the most unexpected crazy for your firm? Watch the look on their face. You think that's not going to get them go? That's a good question. You know what I think is really most interesting? And they might say, it's really interesting. It's not like anything that happened shouldn't have happened. It's just, it was weird. The groups that didn't succeed that I thought might be okay, and then the groups I really thought would fail who turned out pretty good. What group? Like, I'm curious, which ones did you see that succeeded the most, or which ones you thought would fail, right? They took you, they didn't answer it. They took you down a lane but it's so easy. But what do people do? Oh, it's funny you say that, because I was working with this firm and I thought they were dead as fried chicken, right? And oh my goodness, and they went this direction. But we didn't follow up with them. They want to tell us who's on their mind. They even have it pictured in their mind. They just simply want us to pick up that breadcrumb. There's two. You do that 5 times, watch. This person will get lost in their own story with you, and you're on their stage now. And once you're on their stage, they don't want you to leave. They're going to be so open and transparent with you, they'll get lost in what they tell you. But most importantly, they just don't want you to leave.
This parallels so much. And I know we talked about this before, but Chris Voss and negotiation and, you guys, it sounds like have some similarities, right? Like, quit making it all about me. This is about, like you said, a couple of these things. Oh, I thought these firms were dead. And he would say, mirror that back to them or something along those lines. You say, those firms were dead, huh? And you're saying basically the same thing. You're using different words, but can you talk a little bit about like what the commonalities or differences between what the two of you are doing? And I guess if I'm hearing you right, that there are some similarities there.
So I have a lot of admiration for Chris Voss. If you don't know who he is, he's a former FBI hostage negotiator. He wrote the book, Never Split the Difference. I spent years refusing to read a book that says never split the difference. And the reason is I felt like it was all win. But I kept getting told, this guy's a lot like you, Eric. This guy's a lot. So I read it and I thought, this guy's awesome. This guy's so fantastic, because his entire game is based on empathy. Look at the situation he's in. He goes in to you can call it a hostage negotiation, but it's a hold-up situation. Somebody is hunkered down into a space, and either just themselves or they have other people that cannot leave at their own free will. He was taught and trained, take control of the situation. Take control of the situation. Do not let them know who's in charge. Does that sound very similar to the interrogations are? You make them think you know everything about them till they'll say uncle. Here's the thing that Chris Voss does, and what I do, is we say, I'm here. You're here. It is useless for me to see this scene, this situation, this problem from my stage in my movie. Same movie. I have to come here. I have to see it here. Chris Voss never says, you're right. My goodness. We ought to give you all the money. And even if you kill some of these people, don't sweat it. We're going to get you an airplane and an island. He never says that. He simply says, how am I supposed to do this? Most importantly, Chris Voss gives up control. During conversations, we must have such confidence that building trust comes from listening. Listening is giving up control. The speaker has control. People want control. And in wanting control, they want to speak. But they're so fearful of giving up control, they lose all trust, and they're seeking someone to listen to them. I found Saddam Hussein. I'm so proud. I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of being part of Bam Bam's team, and that we accomplished that mission. People say, how'd you do it? I didn't do it. It's being humble. No, I'm not humble. I found Saddam. I'm not humble at all. I didn't come up with the plan. The prisoners did. The enemy came up with the plan. How would I know where Saddam? I was a Chinese Mandarin linguist. I didn't know anything. I mean, if some truth be told, when I was told I was going to Baghdad, if I pulled out a globe, it was not going to take me less than 5 seconds to find Iraq on the globe. I'm just telling you. I didn't exactly know where the place was. I didn't know what bodyguards and Saddam and all that stuff was. When I got there, I gave control to them. But in giving up control, I gained the trust. And trust creates influence. You want control or do you want influence? Because influence stays, influence spreads. We want to build trust to gain influence, and that stays. Control is what's in our immediate presence. Control, it's weird, it's creepy, and it doesn't build team. Influence says, I'm doing this because Eric, I know you're looking out for me. I'm going to fight for this. I'm going to help you, Eric, because you are on my stage. And I strongly recommend, there are very few books that truly understand empathy. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, Chris Floss. There are a couple others, but those are my two. Really, How to Win Friends and Influence People is currently what I would describe as the Bible of empathy-based listening. Now, where I take it, and I love that you're here, Chris. I love that you're taking it this direction. When I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I read it I'll read parts of it on a weekly basis. The problem is he doesn't say how. How? And that's when I say, start with the breadcrumbs. Make it simple. One sentence, one breadcrumb, one discovery. One sentence, hear it, pick out the breadcrumb, discover on it. You start right there and look at the impact.
So this ties in to one of the questions we got, and I think is really critical here. So you do that, and you really find, so you've built the trust, you have the influence, you find out what it is that they want, what's critical to them, right? And some of it might just be puking their guts out and telling you all these things about how great they are or how bad things are for them, whatever it may be, right? But you get to the point where you now understand what they want or need, like truly. What if you can't give it to them? What is your influence worth then? Or what do you do with that? Now, they trust you, but you can't deliver now on what they really want.
I'm going to argue there. Okay. So unless you can give me an example, I would love to have an example of where we can't deliver. Because if I can't deliver for the negotiations that I've been in, I've never been in a negotiation where I didn't feel like we could deliver for the other side. I've never been in a sales event where we felt like we could not deliver for the other side. So can you give me an example?
So let's just use the Chris Voss example, right? So you've got hostage taker. I want a plane and I want money and I want you to let me go and yada, yada. They can't give the hostage takers that. So then what? Are you saying that there's something else they really want and that's what you're going to give them? Or like, where do you go from there?
Great point, right? Perfect example. I cannot let Muhammad Ibrahim walk out the door and there be no ramifications for the gazillions of bombings and individuals that he killed, right? It's not possible. So what we have to do is we have to discover what are their deeper needs. I want an island. I want freedom. I want what? Because when somebody takes measures, it's not the what that they're seeking. It was the emotions that led them to these actions. So we really want to discover, is it fear? Is it revenge? You know, for many hostage takers, it's a voice. They need to be heard. They need to be important. They need to be in charge. They need control. So there's different ways. Now we're going to have to manipulate the situation if their intent is negative, if they're just negative people, but we can push them by influencing them towards gaining control, such as more time to talk, listening to their rants, giving them certain things at certain space to meet these emotions. Now, secretly, yeah, we could be bringing people in. We could be getting other individuals released. When we say we can't give somebody what they want, let's dissect into what are the emotions that are causing that what? Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, I think I hear you. So you might not be able to give them what they say they want, but you can give them what they want in another sense. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
I love to use the example for the interrogations. Again, it's where I have, 2,700 interrogations of experience, and a prisoner comes in and they say, I just want to get released. I say, well, leave, walk out the door. And they're like, I don't think that's such a good idea. I think that guy's going to shoot me. Oh yeah, he will. He'll shoot you, but you can leave. And they're like, Eric, I want to leave and you guys not shoot me. And I say, well, how am I supposed to do that? Because the people who brought you here, and it was not me, the ones who captured you, they think you're terrible. And you are not walking out if they still feel that way. But I'm not terrible. Well, your word doesn't carry a lot of weight right now. We're going to have to prove that. How do we prove it? We're going to have to show them that you actually are going to be as helpful as you can be. What does that look like? I need you to take me to bad guys. Well, I don't know any. Well, then you're going to stay here. Well, Eric, even if I did know bad people, I can't take you to them because they will know it was me and they'll kill my family. That's worse than staying in prison, right? And I say, how are they going to find out? Eric, if I take you to my boss, my leader, everyone knows I just got captured. If I take you to that leader, they're going to know it was me. My family's dead. And I say, what is the way that it happens to where they don't know it was you? And they'll sit there and they'll go, I'm not saying I know where other people across town are, Eric, but if I knew where these individuals were and your soldiers went and captured them, and then they went from that house straight to my boss's house. See, the people out in the city, they don't know I know where these people are, but I do. But I also know those people know where my boss is. Now, if I take you over here across town and you go straight then from that house to my boss's, they'll think they did it. They didn't know it was me. Wow. Well, that makes sense to me. And if you take me to more bad people that I wasn't aware of, I can go tell my boss, not only are you my commander, you're not only taking me to your boss, but you're taking me to other people. Do you see that we have a crowded prison here? We're not here to punish you for what you did. We're here to keep the people in here who are still bad. Now, if I release you, how do I make sure you're not going to be a bad guy? Eric, you can come talk to me anytime you want. And I say, well, I'll make a deal with you. How about we get a location of every family member's house you've ever been to? And that way, if you want to go do something bad again, I'll just go raid and, go to each one of those houses and look and make sure you're okay. Does that make sense? And they're like, I don't love that, but that makes sense. Then your boss will know, right? We are working this out that I can get them what they need. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, I hear you. So help us transition this again to the business setting, right? So we've been talking for 75 minutes. I think the key question, I'm getting a variety of questions in here, but I think some of the underlying is, okay, Eric, we get it. Help us do this. Like, what do we do in these next 15 minutes? Tell us, what are the next steps? There was a question about how do we really eliminate these distractions? There's more questions about the goals to listening. Like, how do we go from here to a point where we're not at 25% listening?
So I do have 90 minutes. I'm going to give you everything I can for this 90-minute period. I'm working right now with Katherine of MFS, who was just on this call. We're actually creating a 1-hour training for analysts during those conversations where maybe both sides don't want to be completely transparent. So we understand that does require a level of training, right? So but when we look at it now, let's start with this, okay? Number one thing, do we understand the value of trust? Yes, I understand trust is important. Then what are we doing wrong? You're having conversations for your own objectives. Therefore, we've got to back it into when you have a conversation, are you willing to walk into that conversation and say, can I self-critique and self-analyze? Do I know what my brain is doing during a conversation? That's the first thing we have to do. And say, okay, well, then what I need you to ask yourself is when I'm in this conversation, what's on my mind? You're going to be able, as a professional, you're going to be able to remove your immediate non-biased distractions. You're going to be able to put your personal issues aside, and you're going to be able to understand if I don't know a topic of conversation or a nomenclature, just ask and we can get that cleared up. The problem comes into biases and agenda. What you must do is go into conversations and say, how much of a normal conversation that I typically have am I moving towards my agenda? How much am I going to solution before I go to discovery? And then say, this is what the current level is of effectiveness. Let's just assume it's 25%, and it's because you're going towards your agenda. Can you then say, every time somebody makes a statement, I have to give a discovery? What does that mean? I'm going to ask a follow-up question. Can you at least do that? Are you willing to make that sacrifice? Say, yep, I'm willing to do it. Great. Well, what's your discovery? Because let me tell you, if we're not discovering on breadcrumbs, it's going to look like an interrogation. It's going to look awkward. I've seen it a million times. So you say, well, I don't want to look like an interrogator, but I'm committed to the discovery. Great. Then let's find breadcrumbs. What are breadcrumbs? Then I need you to look and go, wait a second. When somebody makes a statement, what are the subjective adjectives? What are the exclamatory statements? What are the questions that people are asking? The breadcrumb that you just dropped me was very clear. Eric, put this in our world. And I will put this in your world. I promise, I'm trying to dive this into your world, but it takes just the commitment and to say, wait, I said it, so let me say it again. One statement, one breadcrumb, one discovery. What is a statement? It's what you hear somebody say. Well, what if somebody talks for a minute and a half? Go to their last sentence. You cannot start picking up breadcrumbs at the 15-second or the 30-second or a 90-second statement, because you're going to, not only are you going to forget, or you're going to start thinking of your follow-up breadcrumb and they're going to go 60 seconds where we're already thinking, remember category 6, and we're going to forget it and we're going to lose contact because they're going to realize we're not listening because we're thinking of what we're going to say next. Just listen to them. Listen for breadcrumbs. They can come and they go on their last sentence, whatever their last sentence is, say, what's the best breadcrumb? Doesn't have to be perfect. What do they want me to hear? Get out of your ego, get out of your way and say, it's not my opinion. This isn't about my story. This isn't about my pithy fact. This is about discovery on that breadcrumb. Now, the last thing I need you to do, watch their response. We need to be rewarded. We train. We say, well, I'm going to try this. Did it work? When you pick up a breadcrumb and discover on it, I need you to see the response from an individual. They'll go, that's a good question. Huh. You know what and then they'll follow up. But when they make their next statement, you've got to find that next breadcrumb. Chris, does that make sense?
Following. It's interesting, I think, in our business, for most of us, we ask a question and the automatic response is, that's a great question. They launch right back into whatever they wanted to say anyway. But I think what you just did there was you were giving an example of, that's a great question. And then there's like this pause and moment of thought. Is that the way to assess whether you did it right or not? Is whether it takes them a second to pause and think about it? Like, how do you know? Because if someone just says every question's a great question, well, that's just jerking us around. Like, how do you make this? How do you know?
So let's take this back. If you're in one of these conversations that you all have a lot, and you're doing an interview about a firm, and you're trying to gain transparency, and you're trying to figure some things out. Let's just be perfectly honest, right? Like, transparency is going to be tough. They have reasons not to be completely open and honest, and you probably, if what they tell you is the total truth and it's not perfect, that doesn't benefit them. So what I want you to do is, when you ask a question, right? Ask a question. Their response, say, that's a great question. And they go off in a different direction. The different direction is the breadcrumb. Like, there you go. Oh, so this is the angle they're taking. This is a breadcrumb, is a portal of empathy. This is not a test of how much they listen to you. Like, well, I dropped a breadcrumb. I asked a question. They avoided it. We're not here to judge other people's listening. We're here to listen, to build trust. When somebody's being deceptive and we are not playing on an exclusive trust building relationship, as many of you all face, whatever direction they go should be the breadcrumb. How do we handle that? Can you give me an example? We have a few minutes here, Chris. Can you give me an example of what an analyst might ask a CFO and how they might go in a different direction? Can we try a quick exercise?
Sure. I'll kind of make something off the top of my head, right? Like, so
Okay.
Analyst is asking the CFO about reinvestment plans or rates of return for various different things that they're going to do. And the CFO starts talking about something entirely unrelated. Trying to come up with a good example.
Give me something.
Yeah. Like, well, what they're going to do is going to do XYZ to margins or earnings in the.
No. I'm sorry. I got to stop you.
Yeah, okay.
Give me dialogue. If we're going to pick up breadcrumbs,
Sure.
it can't be XYZ. Put meat on the bone here. Tell me what the analyst asks. Tell me what the CFO responds with. And it can be a diversion.
Yeah. So now you're putting this back on me to come up with an example. All right. Can I, Katherine, you have something?
No, I was going to say, feel free if you wanted to role play. I could represent like a portfolio manager of a strategy.
Sure.
That might be easier for you.
See, you should have prepped me for this, Eric. This is why you do the talking.
This is real. We gotta keep it real.
All right. So Katherine, let's say I'm asking you, hey, it looks like there's been some investment professional turnover here. And it seems to be, more of a theme in why people have been leaving. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. We really value our culture here at the firm. And we really pride ourselves on our, attrition rates, which historically have been very low. Unfortunately, the past year, we have seen an uptick, and we really credit that to just the challenging virtual environment and a lot of personal issues people have been facing. Does that give you something, Eric?
Yes, right? Where do we say? We said, here's what we're facing. We take a lot of pride in it, and we have a virtual issue, right? Now, I'm going to test those waters a little bit. Chris, I'm going to jump in for you, okay? I'm going to say, Katherine, it's not surprising everyone's facing those virtual challenges. It seems like you guys, though, are really struggling, I guess, more than most when it comes to the virtual workplace.
I think, we're really working hard to invest in technology now. We, want to make sure that this isn't an ongoing trend and this is really just like a blip. So I don't want you to worry, like going forward, you shouldn't expect to continue to see, personnel issues.
And specifically, what can you, if you don't mind me, because we do need to know, in terms of technology, what were sort of those deficiencies that would cause people literally to leave their positions, to create turnover just on technology?
Unfortunately, we just didn't have the bandwidth, the VPN, the phone tourettes. People didn't feel like they were part of a team because they couldn't communicate with each other. And, the core team is still here. I don't want you to worry. It's really just on the margins. People had to leave, and we've invested heavily over the past quarter. And, we've seen a leveling off. This is hard.
But did we see what we did there, right? We asked a question. They gave the answer. They made an excuse. It could be the reason. Maybe it's the reason, but it told me where to go. What's the problem? Oh, we just got a technology. We said, oh, it's just a virtual thing. I'm pressing. I am here to press because I'm allowed to do that because there's a problem and no problem. They said, it was just a virtual thing. Oh, it seems like you guys are really struggling virtually. That's a loaded statement. Yes, I'm pushing in that direction. I want to see where they're coming back. Are they going to make more excuses? Are they going to be straight up? Where are they going? But it tells me where to go, right? These interviews that you all do, Chris, these are critical. These are not, and then again, all I've talked about, trust. At the end of the day, We've got to get down to business and we got to get there quick. I didn't say, if I would have started the same conversation, Katherine, just blank slate, and I would have said, Katherine, how's your all's 2020 going with all the virtual communications? Are you guys hanging in there? What would you have said if that would have been the beginning?
Yeah, no, I would have said, everything's going great. We had a couple of hiccups, but we really feel positive about where we stand today. And, I think we're all looking forward to working more closely together over the next 6 months virtually.
What's the breadcrumb? The breadcrumb is hiccups. We've had a couple of hiccups. I'm going towards the hiccups. And I said, Katherine, I understand people have hiccups. I totally get that. Specifically, where did you guys kind of hiccup? Right? Like, boom. They just smooth over things. The problem, and I've seen this in your industry, Chris. People go, yeah, no problem. And the word hiccup, that's the breadcrumb. That's the lead. That's the note. That's the smooth it over. Whoa, it's a hiccup. You're allowed to go ask there. Go press it. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah. Can I take it back to the example, the scenario we just ran through, right? So I've got a trajectory I'm asking this question, and Katherine answers with some sort of response like this, right? So I want to get it back on my path, right? So this is where I've got my agenda, and that I realize is the face. You're giving me the face, right? So, but I want to know more about that. And what I heard you do is say, you built off of this, she's going here, but you sort of rounded it back towards where I want to go. I'm not sure that that's describing it the right way.
Yeah, no, we can always get where you want to go. Let them take you there, though. You're guiding, they're driving. You can get back to where you want to go. That's so easy. If we want to work on that exercise, I'm running out of your people's time. But promise me that we should never stop keeping our agenda just so we're fearful we can't eventually get where we want to go. We can always get where we want to go. We've got to let them take us. She's going to take us to their deficiencies. Yeah. Let her take us. Like, that's what these interviews are about. They're going to take you right there. Just go. And once you get there, don't be afraid to press it. You're allowed to do that.
Perfect. All right. So we're, like you said, we're basically at time. One last thing you want to leave us with, re-emphasize or mention something that you think is critical that we do from today forward.
If you want to get better of all of our skill sets, I need you to make a list of anything that's more important than the ability to truly listen with empathy to build trust. Now that when that list is made, I need somebody to shoot me an email if something's more important than being a true empathy-based listener. If we say, I want it, we must accept the fact that we have a lifetime of experience of listening at 25%. It takes deliberate effort. It can be done in a month. 1 month can change the way that you influence, lead, impact people for the rest of your lives. But it can't be a 90-minute, fireside webinar and go, cool, I'm going to implement that. You have been working on this strategy for a lifetime. You are built into some habits that we must break. But once we see them and you identify the breadcrumbs and you pick up and you discover, I promise you, Jedi abilities. If you can have Jedi abilities during communication in a month, that's not the most important skill set that we're going to sharpen in 2021. I need to reevaluate that decision.
I like the sound of that, Eric. Really, truly appreciate your time and your service to our country. Katherine or Mark Salter, did either of you have any other closing statements you wanted to make?
I think you covered it. Eric, you're always fantastic. And our hope is just that everybody here comes away with actionable, tangible advice that they can apply in their lives. So thank you all for sticking with us. And definitely, feel free to reach out to Chris or I if you ever want more information.
And just one last thank you from CFA Society Minnesota to Chris, to Eric, to Katherine, and to all of you for spending your time with us this afternoon. Much appreciated. Best of luck in 2021. Keep listening.
Thank you.